Well, we're back for our final episode in our motivation series, and we want to wrap everything that we've been talking about together to help see the big picture of why these 6 motivation profiles are important. Now, we've already covered a number of times about how, as givers, we will experience greater depth in generosity and greater effectiveness of our giving to the degree that we incorporate all of these motivations into our giving. And the means by which we begin to grow in all of these 6 motivations is actually found in the rest of the applied generosity framework that we're going to be covering throughout the remainder of this podcast. And you're going to start to see how many of these motivations naturally fit into some of the different dimensions as we walk through them together.
So let's start from the top with relational givers, our first of 6 motivations. Relational givers are motivated by the partnerships that they form with those that they give and serve alongside. So Keelan, where do we see the strengths of relational givers naturally shine in the other dimensions?
Yeah, there's a couple natural places where relational givers fit in. One that comes to mind is when we talk in our next series about domain, right? This is the focus areas of our giving. And we're going to cover 4 core domains. The first of those domains is what we call community, or really the local church. And this is the local expression of the body of Christ that we're a part of. And of the 4 domains, this is a powerful one for relational givers because it is all about building this give and take community, like with a mindset of we're in this together and we are going to sacrifice everything for each other. This is the natural mindset of a relational giver. Relational givers are also a natural fit into the entire dimension of mobilization. Mobilization is all about how do we multiply generosity in the lives of those around us. And we're going to talk about several different spheres of influence in our lives. All of them are natural for relational givers who find it easy to draw others in, to encourage generosity, to bring others around a purpose and a mission. This is where relational givers thrive.
Our second motivation is joyful givers, who are motivated by the internal intrinsic joy of the giving experience. So as we review the remaining dimensions, where do joyful givers fit in?
Well, coming back to domain again, domain 2 is what we call everyday generosity. And this is a sweet spot for joyful givers who are all about this spontaneous, responsive kind of giving in the moment, very focused on the actual experience of giving. When we look down to the dimension of allocation, we're going to break down 4 different kind of allocation structures that all involve different heart postures for how we think about how much to give and how much to keep. And spontaneous giving is one of those 4 heart postures, again, a natural fit for joyful givers. And when we get to the flow dimension, we're going to talk about anonymous giving. By definition, anonymous giving is very focused on the experience itself. You actually cut out the relational side of it intentionally for various reasons. And so it can be a deeply joy-producing experience. And so we're going to get into all that when we get there.
Let's take a look at our third motivation, faithful stewards, who are motivated by obedience, responsibility, and faithfulness to God. Where will we see faithful stewards show up in the other dimensions?
And faithful stewards show up in quite a number of places, but a couple where there is a very powerful kind of connection for faithful stewards is, again, back to the allocation dimension. One of those 4 structures we're going to talk about is what we call the surrender posture, which has to do with how we think about giving when times are tight, when resources are limited. This is a deeply moving and sacrificial, meaningful experience and way to engage for faithful stewards. And some incredible stories have come out of that kind of a season in people's lives. I think also of back to the flow dimension, one of those channels of flow that we're going to talk about is milestone giving. And by definition, milestone gifts are gifts of a magnitude that you can really only make maybe 3 or 4 times at most in your whole life. And because of that, there's a deeply spiritual and transformational process that has to happen as you lead up to that kind of a gift. and as you walk through it, and even in the period afterwards. And so this is a powerful experience that engages this kind of faithful stewardship motivation.
Our fourth motivation is compassion givers, who are motivated to give by the deep emotional connections they form to a specific type of suffering or injustice or a specific group of people. So, where in the other dimensions do we see compassion givers fit?
Yeah, almost by definition, compassion givers are going to fit really well into domains 3 and 4. Now, domain 3 is all about the restoration of the broken world, stepping into deep suffering, pain, injustice. And this is like the bread and butter for a compassion giver, what really motivates them to go to great lengths in their giving. And then domain 4 is advancing the gospel, understanding what Christ has done for us and deeply wanting others to experience that same grace and peace and salvation in their own lives. And compassion givers will go to great lengths to engage in both of these domains on a deep and sacrificial level, which is one of the defining features of compassion givers.
And next, we'll move on to our impact givers, who want to see meaningful change and tangible outcomes from their giving. Which dimensions come most naturally for impact givers?
Yeah, this one's easy. Of the dimensions, there's an entire dimension that really centers around impact givers, which is intervention. We talked about domain being the focus areas of our giving. Intervention is all about how do we engage meaningfully with those domains. And so this is where impact givers thrive. We're going to talk about all kinds of different ways that we think about how we engage the problems of the world and how we think about evaluating organizations and programs to try to achieve a high yield return from our giving.
And finally, our sixth motivation is strategists, who are motivated by channeling and redirecting more resources into the kingdom. How do strategists play a part in the other dimensions?
Some of the areas that come to mind when we move back to allocation, how much do we give and keep? We're going to talk about giving goals and financial finish lines, both of which are highly strategic in how we think about how we allocate what we give, what we keep. We're also going to talk about in the flow dimension quite a number of strategic tax advantaged strategies. We're going to talk about donor advised funds. All of this is really the sweet spot for strategists who are about multiplying how resources flow in order to make big moves into the kingdom. And then finally, the entire dimension of investing is often a natural fit for strategists who frequently come from the business or investing world. Strategists love to put dollars to use in creative ways and to multiply the movement of dollars into the kingdom. And investing can be a powerful way to do that.
Now, we're going to get into all of these strategies and tools as we unpack all of the other six dimensions. But you can see how if you neglect some of the motivations, you're going to miss entire dimensions of generosity.
And as you're listening through the rest of this framework in the episodes to come, think back to this motivation framework. Which motivations felt foreign or unnatural? Those are the areas where you have the most room to grow, where you are going to experience the greatest depth in your journey if you really dig in and think through as we go through these remaining dimensions. Lean in those areas that engage those motivations that may not be very strong. As you do, you will begin to see them grow and you will become a deeper, more thoughtful, intentional, wise, strategic, loving, relational giver as you do.
So that wraps up our series on motivation. In our next series, we're going to talk through domain, the focus areas of our giving. Stay tuned.